The jungle pressed in on all sides, thick and suffocating, its dense foliage whispering secrets from ancient times. The air was heavy, cloying with the scent of wet earth, damp leaves, and the rich aroma of blooming flowers that seemed to vibrate with life. Shadows danced in the underbrush as the sun barely filtered through the thick canopy, leaving the world below bathed in an eerie twilight. Every step taken felt like a promise of something unknown, danger, adventure, or something far worse. In the midst of it all, James stumbled forward, his breath ragged, his body bruised and scraped from days of navigating this hostile environment. Sweat soaked his shirt, making it cling to his chest like a second skin. His legs burned, the exhaustion creeping into his bones, but he pushed on. There was no turning back now. The map he had followed, a tattered relic passed down through generations, had led him here, to the heart of the legendary jungle, a place where no human had ever ventured and lived to tell the tale. The Valley of the Giants, so named by the few explorers who spoke of it in hushed tones before vanishing into myth. There were stories of beings so tall they touched the sky, their beauty so mesmerizing it was said to transcend the human imagination. No one truly believed the stories, until now. He could hear the sounds of the jungle shifting, the soft rustling of leaves growing louder, like whispers gathering into something more. He stopped, pressing himself against the trunk of a massive tree, his heart racing in his chest. There it was again. The softest creak of a branch, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. They were too heavy to be human. His instincts screamed at him to run, to escape whatever presence loomed just beyond the trees. But he couldn't move. His legs refused to obey. The silence that followed was thick, oppressive, and then, from the shadows, she emerged. The first thing he saw were her eyes. Bright, golden, and piercing, they glowed in the dim light, as if they held the secrets of the universe within them. Then came the rest of her. Her skin was the color of polished bronze, flawless and shimmering under the faint sun. She stood at least 10 feet tall, her towering presence enough to make James feel as small as a child, lost in the vastness of the world. Her long hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of liquid gold, shimmering with an ethereal quality. She spoke, her voice like a song, resonant and calm, yet carrying a weight that made James's chest tighten. "You are not lost, human," she said, her words in perfect English, though tinged with an accent James couldn't place. "You have come here for a reason." James's mouth went dry. His throat worked, but no words came. The giant woman took a step forward, her every movement graceful, as if she were part of the forest itself. Her eyes never left him, filled with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper, something ancient. "Who are you?" James managed to rasp. His voice barely rose above a whisper, but somehow she heard him clearly. "I am Tira, leader of the tribe of the beautiful giants," she said, her gaze unwavering. "And you are the one we have been waiting for." Her words struck him like a lightning bolt, sending a shiver down his spine. He had read the legends, heard the rumors, but none of it had prepared him for this moment. He had assumed the giants were nothing more than myth, the stories designed to keep people away from the jungle's depth. But here she was, in front of him, an impossibility brought to life. Tira stepped closer, her movements fluid and hypnotic, like the slow, deliberate sway of a tree in the wind. James could smell the faintest hint of flowers, a soft, intoxicating fragrance that seemed to wrap around him, clouding his mind. "Why me?" he asked, his voice steadying as he met her gaze. "Why did you bring me here?" Tira's lips parted into a smile, one that was both tender and laced with sorrow. "You are not here by accident. Your kind, the humans, you carry within you a power, an essence that we have long lost. A gift we need to survive." She paused, her eyes darkening, and James saw the flicker of something desperate in her gaze. "We need you to help us?" James's pulse quickened, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. This wasn't what he had imagined when he set foot in the jungle. There had been no mention of saving a race of giant beings. He was supposed to be here for the treasure, the glory, something tangible. But this? This felt different. Tira watched him closely, as though reading his thoughts. "You are the last hope of our kind," she continued, her voice gentle but firm. "Without you, we will fade into nothing. But if you are willing, together we can change everything." James didn't know how to respond. Part of him wanted to laugh, to tell her it was some kind of elaborate joke. But there was something in her eyes that stopped him. She was not lying. Whatever this was, it was real. He took a step back, his thoughts swirling. "What exactly do you need me to do?" Tira's gaze softened, though her expression remained serious. "You will understand soon enough." And then, in the stillness of the jungle, she extended her hand to him, an invitation, a promise, and an unspoken challenge all at once. James stared at her hand, the weight of the moment settling over him. The sun had now dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley. Somewhere, deep in the forest, a bird cried out, but the sound felt distant, like it was coming from another world. With a deep breath, James took her hand. The moment their fingers touched, the ground beneath them trembled, as if the very earth was waking up to some forgotten rhythm. The jungle seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what came next. The forest around them hummed with an unfamiliar energy, its once calming whispers now charged with tension. James had never felt anything like it. The air itself seemed alive, humming with an intensity that made every breath feel heavier, like the very atmosphere was drawing him in, claiming him. The jungle's strange pulse mirrored his own, as though the earth itself was attuned to the presence of something ancient, something powerful, something waiting. Tira's hand was warm in his, strong yet surprisingly delicate, as though every touch carried the weight of centuries. Her fingers closed around his, anchoring him in this world, even as his mind struggled to process everything happening around him. She had said he was the last hope of her people. But for what? And how? As they walked deeper into the valley, the landscape began to change. What had once been dense foliage and tangled vines slowly transformed into a wide, open clearing. The trees here stood tall and straight, their bark shimmering like polished marble, and the air was thick with the scent of exotic flowers. The moon, now risen high in the sky, bathed everything in a soft, silvery light that made the scene look almost dreamlike, as though it had been pulled straight from a myth. James's eyes darted around, taking in the sheer beauty of it all. The clearing was vast, a natural amphitheater surrounded by towering cliff. At the center stood an enormous stone altar, carved with intricate symbols that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. Strange patterns spiraled along its surface, and at its base were countless offerings, flowers, fruits, and what looked like polished stones. "Welcome to the heart of our tribe," Tira's voice broke the silence, low and reverent. "This is where we conduct our most sacred rituals." James swallowed, his mouth dry. "Rituals? What kind of rituals?" Tira's gaze softened, but there was something in her eyes, a deep sadness, that he hadn't noticed before. "The ritual of our renewal. We perform it once every 100 years, to ensure the survival of our kind." He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. 100 years? Survival of your kind? The words had weight, but he couldn't yet understand their full meaning. It all felt like a dream, a dangerous, disorienting dream where he was caught in the middle of something far beyond his comprehension. "Does this ritual involve me?" James asked, his voice tinged with apprehension. Tira turned to face him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, in a voice thick with emotion, she spoke. "Yes. You are the key, James. You and the essence of your humanity are what we need." James flinched. "What does that mean? Essence of my humanity?" Tira's golden eyes darkened, a flicker of pain crossing her features. "The essence of your life force, your spirit. Our kind, once powerful beyond measure, have grown weak over the centuries. We can no longer sustain ourselves without it. We need the bond of your kind, something we lost long ago." And you, James, are the last human with the ability to restore us? James took a step back, a chill running through him. Her words, though spoken calmly, felt like a gut punch. He wasn't sure what he had expected when he first stumbled into the jungle, but it certainly hadn't been this. The weight of it all pressed on him, making the air feel thicker, suffocating. "How am I supposed to help you?" His voice trembled, the reality of the situation starting to settle in. "You said I was the key. But I don't." Tira stepped closer, her gaze intense, locking with his. She reached out, gently cupping his face with one large hand. Her touch was oddly soothing, yet the power in it was undeniable. "James," she said softly, "we are connected, in ways that you cannot yet understand. The moment you entered our valley, your life force began to merge with ours. You're not just here by chance. You were brought to us for a purpose." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "But it is a path filled with sacrifice. I cannot promise you that it will be easy." The words hung heavy in the air, and James found himself rooted to the spot. He had no idea what was happening, but there was something undeniably magnetic about Tira. Her presence stirred something in him, a strange, primal attraction that made his pulse race. He couldn't deny it. Despite the overwhelming confusion, a part of him wanted to know more, wanted to understand. "And if I don't help you?" he asked, though the question felt hollow, as if he already knew the answer. Tira's gaze darkened, her eyes narrowing as a shadow crossed her features. "If you do not help us, then our race will fade into nothingness. We will be lost forever. And you will be trapped in this place, forever bound to us, without ever truly understanding the cost." The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow, but before he could respond, the ground beneath them began to tremble. It started as a faint vibration, like the rumbling of distant thunder, but it grew louder with each passing second. The stones of the altar vibrated, sending a ripple through the air, and a deep, almost mournful hum filled the clearing. Tira's eyes widened, and she grabbed his hand again, pulling him toward the altar. "It begins," she said, urgency creeping into her voice. Before James could protest, he found himself standing before the altar, his heart racing as the ground beneath his feet shook more violently. The hum grew louder, vibrating in his chest, and he could feel his body responding, something inside him stirring in a way he couldn't explain. Tira stepped back, her hands rising, palms outstretched toward the altar. "The ritual demands a willing participant," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing hum. "You must make a choice now, James. Will you accept your role in our survival? Or walk away, leaving us to die?" James's head spun, his thoughts a blur. But one thing was clear, whatever choice he made now would change everything. The earth beneath James's feet trembled violently, a deep, resonating pulse that rattled his bones. The hum from the altar had grown into an unrelenting roar, vibrating the air around him as though the very fabric of reality was coming undone. His breath caught in his throat, his chest tightening, his heart racing with a frantic urgency he couldn't escape. It wasn't just the ground beneath him that was shifting, it was the world itself, as though time itself had taken a breath and was now holding it in. Tira's hands were still raised, her body swaying gently with the flow of the ritual. Her eyes were locked on his, her gaze unwavering, desperate, and something far deeper, something primal, shone through the golden depths of her irises. "James," she whispered, the urgency in her voice pulling at something inside him, "you must choose. The ritual requires a willing participant, one who will offer their essence freely. You are the one we've waited for, the one who can save us." The words hung in the air like the weight of the world itself. The trembling of the earth, the crackling energy of the air, everything pointed to this singular moment. A choice. A decision that would forever alter the fate of the giants and, perhaps, his own. Tira's voice, soft yet heavy, pierced his swirling thoughts. "If you don't, we will fade away. And you?" Her gaze softened, but the pain in her eyes was unmistakable. "You will be trapped here. Forever. James felt his pulse quicken, and his stomach twisted into tight knots. His mind raced, unable to grasp the full enormity of the choice before him. What did she mean by trapped? The weight of her words gnawed at him, making his insides feel hollow. 100 different possibilities played out in his mind, none of them comforting. His life, everything he had known, was at the mercy of this strange ritual, this ancient, mystical procedure that seemed both distant and terrifyingly close. He swallowed hard, his mouth dry as dust. "I don't understand," he said, his voice thick with the uncertainty choking him. "What is this essence? And why do I have to be the one to?" He faltered, unsure of what words could make sense of this madness. Tira's gaze didn't waver. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them, until their bodies were mere inches apart. Her heat, the warmth of her body, pressed into him like an invisible force, drawing him in closer despite the questions and confusion swirling in his mind. "It is your humanity," she said, her voice a low, melodic hum, "the strength of your spirit, the fire that burns within you. We lost our ability to connect with your kind centuries ago. But you, your essence is the key to our survival. Without it, we will wither." James's head spun with her words, his mind trying to piece together something coherent from the fractured fragments of the situation he found himself in. He couldn't deny the pull, the electric charge that hummed in the air between them. Every breath he took seemed to carry the scent of something ancient, something intoxicating, and every glance he stole toward her seemed to amplify that feeling. But the question remained, could he trust her? "I'm just one man," James whispered, trying to make sense of it all. "How can I save you? I'm not some hero, Tira. I'm just lost." Her golden eyes softened, a flicker of something tender passing across her features before the intensity returned. She placed her hand on his chest, over his heart, where he could feel the thudding beat of his pulse beneath her palm. "You have more power than you know," she said, her voice almost reverent. "You are the last of your kind with the ability to bring us back. Your blood, your spirit, they are the key to restoring balance. Without your essence, we cannot survive." The words rattled through him like an explosion, reverberating through his chest, his very soul. His blood? His spirit? "What does it mean for me?" His voice trembled as he spoke, the weight of the decision pressing down harder, suffocating him. "What happens if I give you this essence? What do I lose?" Tira's gaze softened again, and for a fleeting moment, James saw the vulnerability in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. She wasn't just the powerful, enigmatic giantess who had captured his attention from the first moment. She was someone carrying the weight of her people's fate. "To give it freely," she said, her voice quieter now, "means you offer a part of yourself. A bond is formed between us, one that transcends physical existence. You will be tied to us, to this world, to the very heart of the jungle. The essence you give us will nourish us, restore us, but you will be bound to this place in ways you cannot yet understand." Her words hung in the air like a promise, one that was equal parts salvation and damnation. James felt his chest tighten. He wanted to pull away from her, to run, to escape this place before it consumed him. But something in him, a deep, instinctual pull, kept him rooted to the spot. Her presence was magnetic, irresistible, and he could feel the quiet power surging from her, wrapping around him like a shroud. His thoughts tangled, and his heart beat faster. "Is there any other way?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Tira shook her head slowly, the moonlight glinting off her bronze skin as she met his gaze. "No," she replied simply. "This is the only way. The only way for us to survive. For you to survive." For a moment, James felt time stand still, as though the very earth around him was holding its breath, waiting for his decision. The silence stretched out like a vast, endless chasm between him and the rest of his life. He thought about his own humanity, the family, the friends, the life he'd left behind. All of it would slip away in the blink of an eye. But what did he have left if he walked away? His mind raced, but then, in the deep recesses of his heart, something clicked. A strange sense of understanding washed over him. He wasn't just here by accident. He had always known he was meant for something greater. The choice was his, but there was a deeper pull, one he couldn't ignore. He looked into Tira's eyes, the golden depths pulling him in, and without another word, he stepped forward. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady with resolve. "I'll help you." The air hummed with an electric charge as James stood before Tira, his heart thundering in his chest. The moment he had chosen had arrived. There was no turning back. The earth beneath him trembled in synchrony with the pulsing energy of the valley, and the night sky above seemed to stretch endlessly, a dark sea of stars watching silently. The entire jungle had quieted, as if holding its breath, anticipating the ritual to come. Tira's golden eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity, and her expression was unreadable, beautiful yet distant. There was an undeniable power radiating from her, one that both terrified and enthralled him. Her presence felt like an anchor and a storm at the same time, steady and overwhelming. "You're sure about this?" she asked, her voice calm yet heavy with the weight of centuries. The air between them thickened with a shared understanding that words couldn't fully express. It was more than just a ritual, more than just a sacrifice. This was the bond that would tie them together, forever changing the course of their lives. James inhaled deeply, the cool night air mixing with the scent of the earth and exotic flowers. His hands shook slightly, but his resolve remained firm. The choice had been made, and despite the confusion, despite the unknowns, a part of him knew this was the only path forward. The essence that he would offer, this mysterious part of himself, wasn't just a lifeline for the giants. It was his own form of salvation, even if he didn't fully understand what that meant yet. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady though his heart raced. "I've made my decision." Tira didn't speak immediately. She stepped closer, her tall form casting a shadow over him. The closeness of her body, her heat, sent a surge of tension through him, the energy crackling in the space between them like a live wire. She reached out, fingers brushing against his cheek with the gentleness of a breeze, yet the force behind the touch was unmistakable. The sensation of her skin against his made his entire body respond, a surge of desire, fear, and anticipation running through him. "I've waited for this," she whispered, her voice low and almost reverent. "For centuries, my people have waited for a moment like this. For you." James swallowed hard, suddenly overwhelmed by the gravity of what was happening. The ritual wasn't just some mystical procedure. It was a union, a merging of two worlds. His humanity, his very essence, was the key to their survival. But in giving it, he would be bound to them, bound to this jungle, and to Tira herself. He looked into her eyes, those golden, ancient eyes, and felt something stir deep within him, something far older than the man he had been before. It wasn't just the allure of her power, her beauty, or the mystery of her people. It was something more, something undeniable, something that made him feel like he was meant to be here, in this moment, with her. The world around them seemed to pulse with anticipation. The hum of the altar had reached a crescendo, vibrating in the very air they breathed. Tira's fingers slid down from his cheek to his throat, her touch light, but her grip unyielding. "Once we begin, there is no turning back. The essence you give me will forever bind us. There will be no separation, no way to undo what's done." James's pulse quickened as he felt the weight of her words sink in. "I understand," he said, his voice thick with the realization of what was about to happen. "I'm not turning back." Tira nodded, the ghost of a smile passing across her lips. "Then it begins?" With a slow, deliberate motion, Tira placed her hand over his chest, her palm resting against his heart. The warmth of her skin burned through him, sending shock waves of sensation down his spine. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade into nothingness. Then, without warning, the energy in the air exploded. James gasped, his body jerking as a strange, almost painful force surged through him. It was as if the very essence of his being was being pulled from his core, drawn out and into the space between them. His vision blurred, his breath shallow as the energy wrapped around him, an intense and disorienting feeling flooding every nerve. The air grew thick, suffocating, as the force of the ritual pushed against him from all sides. Tira's hand tightened on his chest, her eyes glowing brighter, until they almost burned. Her lips parted in a breathless sigh as she absorbed the energy, the essence, that James was releasing. The world around them seemed to distort, the trees and stars swirling in and out of focus as though reality itself was stretching, warping, bending. But in the chaos there was a strange sense of calm. A stillness, as if something deep within James was finding its place in this foreign world. His breath steadied as he realized, with a startling clarity, that he wasn't just giving away a part of himself. He was becoming part of this world, part of Tira, part of something far greater than his understanding. His vision cleared for a moment, and he met Tira's gaze, seeing the depth of her emotions reflected back at him. There was a tenderness there, something raw and real amidst the intensity of the ritual. The pulse of energy slowed, and for a brief moment everything was still. But that stillness was shattered by a sudden, violent shock, like a crack of thunder splitting the heavens. James gasped as the force of it tore through him, ripping his body in two. He fell to his knees, his breath ragged, his chest burning as if every cell in his body was being remade. Tira's voice rang out in his ears, almost a cry of relief, of release. "It's done. You have given yourself. You are one with us, James." As the final words left her lips, a deep, throbbing sensation filled the pit of his stomach, a sensation that pulsed through him, the bond now fully realized. His essence was hers, and she, in turn, was now a part of him. But as the ritual reached its climax, something else stirred, a sharp, unexpected pain. A flash of danger. Something wasn't right.